Okay, thank you. So very much, I'm really reading John Baxendale's paper here. John Baxendale couldn't make it today. Okay, so title is, yeah, gives already. When he was interviewed in the mid-1960s by historian Angus Calder, the novelist, playwright, and broadcaster J.D. Priestley asked, I quote, gloomily and rhetorically, unquote, why everyone was talking about this man Orwell. And then Priestley went on to argue, I said everything that Orwell said, he complained, but people don't talk about me. This claim, as Calder virtually concedes in The Myth of the Blitz 1991, has some truth to it. Both were committed socialists on the non-communist left and active in left-wing causes. Both wrote novels as well as non-fiction and journalism which engaged with social and political issues. Each undertook a famous journey of social investigation in the 1930s, Priestley with English Journey, published in 1934, and Orwell with The Roachwood Pierce in 1937, in which they didn't just describe the sufferings of the Depression, but sought to place them in a broader social and political context. In wartime, when both were employed by the BBC, they adopted a similar radical position that the war could and should be a vehicle for fundamental social and political change. And these ideas were underpinned by similar conceptions of Englishness and national character. Both, in short, were writers of the left, rooted in Englishness, who anticipated and expressed the radical mood of the 1940s. And if anything, it's got to be acknowledged that Priestley got there first. Despite these similarities and parallels, the paths of the two writers seldom crossed. In fact, though I have not scoured the archives, I, of course, John Baxendale, this is going to generate a severe identity crisis because the first person singular is used all the time. I do not know, I, John Baxendale, do not know a single occasion when they met or a single letter which passed between them. This may not be as surprising as it looks. Priestley was 9 years older than Orwell, and by the time Orwell was making his way in literary London, Priestley, aged around 40, was already a celebrity, following the runaway success of the novel The Good Companions in 1929. Subsequent best-selling novels, plays, journalism, and broadcasting kept his name in the public eye, and his fame reached its peak in the Second World War, when his radio talks achieved a popularity second only to Churchill himself. I think we had a talk about that last night with Anglais. We mentioned BBC and Priestley. And so when in the early 1930s each reviewed one of the other's books, it was from very different vantage points. Priestley's favourable review of Down and Out in Paris and London appeared in January 1933 in the London Evening Standard, of which he was now lead reviewer, a lofty and lucrative pulpit formerly occupied by Arnold Bennett. While Orwell's, or Eric Blair's, review of Priestley's novel Angel Pavement, 2 years earlier, appeared in the Adelphi, the small circulation magazine of the highbrow left towards which he had gravitated on entering London literary life, and which appears disguised as the Antichrist in the novel Cue the Aspidistra Flying. This may just have been a matter of timing, actually. After all, when Orwell reached 40, though he was hardly a household name, he had made his way out of the Antichrist and into the Observer, and had begun Animal Farm, which along with 1984, as we all know, would make him famous, and no doubt wealthy had he lived. However, posthumous reputations require a different explanation. By the mid-1960s, as Priestley complained, Orwell had become a political, intellectual, and literary figure of major importance. His books, particularly 1984 and Animal Farm, were widely read and taught in schools, and his reputation continued to grow until he became almost beyond criticism, as those who tried to criticize him were to discover. Priestley, on the other hand, still writing at 70 years of age and with 2 more decades ahead of him, I don't know whether this is ironic, but he died in 1984. Priestley had a far more ambivalent status, prolific and popular novelist and playwright, widely read, well-liked, perhaps a little old-fashioned, but his political role in the 1930s and 40s was now all but forgotten. Indeed, when scholars began to take an interest in the concept of Englishness in the 1980s, Orwell's writings on the subject were treated as seminal, but Priestley was misread as some kind of nostalgic conservative. Today, if anything, the gap between them has widened. I suspect that many people here know little about Priestley, and some perhaps have never heard of him. And despite a recent revival of interest, until a couple of years ago, none of his books was in print. Orwell, however, is a household name now, even to people who have never opened one of his books. A search of the Guardian website, as I am writing this paper, reveals that since the beginning of 2009, he has been mentioned no less than 231 times in that paper, and at a similar, though fluctuating rate over the past decade, 2, 3, or 4 times a week. In my view, there are 2 reasons for this. First, Priestley was the wrong kind of writer. Second, although, like Orwell, was a committed socialist, his political roots lay in an English radical tradition which has all but disappeared from view. Angus Calder contends that the reason why Orwell is more widely recognized is that Priestley was unable to express his ideas in, I quote, arguments and stories and images which people would find haunting, unquote. This comment overlooks a rather important fact, which is that in their day, far more people read and enjoyed Priestley's books than Orwell's. This popularity did not win him many friends amongst the intellectual elite. To highbrow contemporaries like Huey Lewis and Virginia Woolf, Priestley was the very epitome of the middle brow. Unwary readers might be fooled into thinking that he was a serious writer with a message, but they were wrong. He was really no more than a popular entertainer. Orwell took the same view. Gordon Comstock in Keep the Aspidistra Flying spots rather dismissively the latest Priestley in the bookshop where he is working. Orwell Blair's review of Angel Payments in 1930, which is a Depression-era story of the destruction of a small family firm and the lives of all those concerned with it at the hands of a crooked financier, writes it off as, I quote, a holiday novel, genuinely gay and pleasant, and in a later piece, I quote, mainly humorous in intention, in the tradition of Charles Dickens and Hugh Walpole. This seemed like an odd verdict, considering the book's bleak ending and downbeat subject matter, although at the height of the so-called Battle of the Brows, it seems unlikely that the Adelphi would have published a favorable review of a Priestley novel. I'm not going to discuss the relative literary merits of Orwell's and Priestley's novels, although Orwell seems to me to write in a similar realist mode to the despising of Brows. But if you are writing with political intent, there is surely something to be said for a lot of people reading what you write.